Touchdown, Seahawks! Are you kidding me?
All right, moving on. Number 26, the Blackout. All right, Ethan.
These are the days where I would try to beg people to come to games with me, and I couldn't find anyone. So clearly no one cared.
And this is kind of one of those things, too, where it's we're trying to explain to the younger audience what it was like being like a fan back in the day, because the 90s were great in Seattle for a number of reasons, but Seahawks football was not one of them. I mean, it was tough being a Seahawks fan in Seattle. Look, you had everything else. Everything else was great. You know, you had the grunge scene.
Yep.
You had Sir Mix-a-Lot. You had Sonics basketball.
Yep, but it's all-time great at the time, maybe other than 79, of course.
Exactly. You had the explosion of companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks. You had
most of them are just on the up and up though too. Because if you remember, Josh, didn't it kind of almost feel like it was a little economically depressed? I mean, unless you worked for Boeing or you worked for a Warehouser, it just seemed like. Other than that, people were just trying to grind out a living, very blue collar. It was a little different era than maybe what Seattle is now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of those giant corporations.
Absolutely. Those were just starting to come up, you know, like Microsoft, like 95 Windows and all that good stuff. But being a Seahawks fan in Seattle, oh boy. Well, it all started in the late 80s when Nordstrom sold the team to Ken Behring. And we didn't have many superstars on those teams either, so that kind of contributes to this, because if you don't have superstars and your owner doesn't care and you're not winning and you're playing in the dark and gloomy kingdom, who wants to go to the games? Like you said, you're not able to even give these tickets away. So
it was miserable from the standpoint too of like literally, I wasn't joking, Josh, like you can almost tell what we were doing by the depth of Chris Warren in the backfield, and given we had limited options. But it was just like, it was just frustrating time to be a fan. And like I said, the only games that were sold out were against huge Super Bowl contending opponents. And then 80% of the fans were for those teams, which is like, you never thought in a million years you'd see that when through those heydays of the 80s, when you're got Monday Night Football against the Broncos or the Raiders and the whole crowd's chanting, Elway, no way, and all this stuff, you know, and the Raider Buster t-shirts and the Bronco Busters. And you were horrified in a sense to see this.
Yeah. So what happened was the league had this blackout policy, and that prevented the fans from even seeing their own games on TV. So, and that kind of like works both ways too, because like how are you supposed to get excited about a team or the players if you can't watch them, especially if you're a kid, you know, and your family doesn't have a lot of money, you're not going to these games.
It was like 100 and something mile radius from where the game was at, right? And you had to have like 75 or 80 something % of the tickets sold like 3 days prior. I mean, it was crazy. And a lot of times it felt like the only games we did get to occasionally peak is because one of those major corporations, out of the kindness of their heart, would buy a bunch of seats and give them to their employees just to get a game on television occasionally. Yeah,
it was bad too. And like, you know, like you mentioned, it was hard being a fan because when you're a kid, you want someone to look up to, like a player, like Matt Hasselbeck or Russell Wilson or whatever it might be. But the Seahawks weren't on TV half the time, so you were like, okay, well, I like Barry Sanders. That guy's pretty awesome. I like Dan Marino. He's amazing. Bo Jackson. Oh yeah, these guys are awesome. Like, you know, so you start like, you know, following these other guys, and you know, how many of our friends growing up had, you know, they were Seahawks fans, but then they had their other team.
Right.
You know
exactly.
what I mean? Like,
we were kind of forced to because of that 90s era. It's so funny. Weird. It's synonymous with that time period of the crappy quarterbacks we just listed too. Huh?
Yeah,
Imagine how that works.
Yep. So just to put this in perspective here, between the years of 1993 and 2003, there were a total of 48 home games that were blacked out. 48. Wow. Think about that. Like, there's only so many football games in a season.
Yeah, you got 8 home games in the regular season, max.
That's insane. So
that is insane.
So the 90s were some pretty dark days for the city of Seattle, literally blacked out. So, yeah.
Maybe the inspiration for Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden joking.
I love it. Love the reference. Love it. So, yeah. You know, the Seahawks.
List here too. You talk about there's so many teams at that time that were popular from the West, you know, that were shown on the West Coast, like the Niners, You know,
Right.
you got Steve Young's era. You got the Chargers. They make it to the Super Bowl, and Junior Seau. The Raiders are very popular. I don't know why, because we hadn't been good since 1983. As a guy that was a closet, well, I was that closet. I was a big Raider fan, but like you said, because
because like the West Coast teams, remember, because like they would play all the East Coast games on the east side on the East Coast. So
the early time slot.
Yeah, so if your game is blacked out in your area, there's only a couple games on the TV. So that's how that
question
works.
helped solidify my love of the Raiders is because I loved Howie Long. That's because that's what I could watch if I wasn't going to the games. And there were some of those games that we split tickets with another family or whatever. So yeah, it was
going through that list, I literally went through every blackout of all the teams. I think the only team that had more blackouts, home blackouts, was the Raiders, because they had to sell out the Coliseum.
Los Angeles Coliseum, yeah. Good luck with that. It's a gigantic stadium.
Yeah, so that's like not even fair.
Yeah. Well, and we were at a point too where we were on the slow decline as well.
Yeah. Yep. So, the blackout era, the 90s blackout era, and your Seattle Seahawks, who you are not watching on television.
Lights out!